Hi, I'm Mark Edwards, and welcome to Musical Differences, a podcast, a conversation, a chat between friends who will discuss their musical interests, their musical obsessions, and their musical differences too. Our guest on this episode is Glenn Graham. Glenn is an old customer, a work colleague, but like the best customers and work colleagues, we have a musical interest in common. Indeed, I've even bumped into Glenn at gigs in and around London from time to time. So enjoy. Anyway, well, look, thank you for joining us for Musical Differences. Musical Differences, an opportunity really for old geezers like us to chat, have a conversation about, say, musical influences, musical obsessions, and I'm wondering as to whether we're gonna find some musical differences between us. So I'm gonna kick off this with some lyrics, not 9 to 5 from Dolly Parton this time.
Thank God for that.
Which you were. I'm trying to guess whether you would even pick up on these. Let's see. The lyrics are: "It's 1 o'clock and time for lunch. Hum-de-dum-de-dum. When the sun beats down and I lie on the bench, I can always hear him talk." That's straight over your head then.
Yes, no, you can hear it whistling past my ears, can't you?
It is Genesis. I know what I like. I was kind of guessing.
Ooh, interesting.
I'm guessing you must be, what are you, Genesis or Yes or Pink Floyd? Which you're of an age.
I've got a long list of stuff we're going to talk about here, but and I do talk about the fact that I was introduced to Genesis in the days when Peter Gabriel was slightly off the wall.
Yes, with a shaved piece at the front of his head, if you remember. That was very strange, wasn't it?
And I mean, we'll go on to it because it's part of my sort of list of things I was going to talk to you about.
Yeah.
But I never really, never quite got it.
Right. Okay. So if it wasn't Genesis, was it Yes, or was it Pink Floyd?
Both.
Or was it none of them?
Oh no, it was both of those.
Oh, it was both of those.
Yeah.
Because I mean, remind me, how old are you?
70.
70. 70. I didn't think you were that old. I thought you were right. Okay. I think you have told me before. You actually, you remember the 60s.
I do.
Right. So I don't know whether then the culture, you see, so I'm 60 this year. So the culture when I was growing up was you'd go into school and school and youth club as well was very much about records. And so you go into school and, it was, you'd have your bag from the local HMV or whatever with whatever records were in there. And it was definitely in my day, it was Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, say Pink Floyd, but you're a bit earlier then, was it? Or were you a bit more Humble Pie and, well, maybe the Stones and the Beatles probably then, was it?
Well, I think one of the things you were leading up to was like, what do you remember as the first record? I say pop record or record of any note. And I will answer that. But one of the things I would also mention that I was brought up with a father who, I mean, we didn't have, we lived in a council house, we didn't have much money, but my father somehow, through a friend, managed to get a reel-to-reel tape.
Oh, awesome.
Great big chunky thing. I mean, it must have been huge. And you could buy in boxes, cardboard boxes with a with a lid with artwork on it, and a reel-to-reel tape.
Yeah. And
so I was brought up with listening. Now, not listening as in sitting there and listening, but having it in the background because my father would have it on.
Yeah.
People like Lionel Hampton, Oscar Peterson, Buddy Rich, those sort of Frank Sinatra and all that sort of stuff. And then he would switch to Dvorak or Dvorak, some people badly tell it.
Right.
Tchaikovsky, Sibelius, all that sort of thing. And so I had an upbringing where music was played. It wasn't the radio playing. My father wouldn't listen to the radio for music anyway. He would put on his tapes, which took forever. You don't just switch it on. You got to feed it through. And then
I know.
Set it all up, and for goodness sake.
But part of that, I mean, it's interesting because one of the things I was going to ask is, what was as you said, the early hi-fi, the equipment that you had was also going to determine what you listened to, because if you had, as it is for me today, my Lynn Sondek turntable, I can't play 45s on it. And without changing the belt drive. I don't bother to play singles. I have singles, but I don't bother to play them. And I'm guessing, but you're the first person I know who'd have had access to. I don't know what that must have been like. I don't know. That would have been 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch tape. But the fiddly bits is quite fetishist. I would have said there's an element to preparing. You're investing more effort.
You don't just plonk it on and press the button. You say, you've got to get it tape. You've got to feed it through all the bits and pieces so it goes past the head.
Yeah.
And then you've got to put it through the empty reel, which is on the other side, because clearly it's going that way.
Yeah.
And then there was no indication of where it started. Like with a record, you could put a stylus or a needle, as we used to call it.
Yes. Yeah.
At the start, with the tape, you just press go, and eventually it would kick in and off.
Could you record with it? Did you have a microphone that you could record on, or?
So my father then went from that one. Again, my uncle was an absolute. He was a sound engineer for somebody. I can't remember who it was now, but he got he always had the latest and greatest. So all his hand-me-downs were given to my father, and my father did end up with a really big one, which did a very interesting thing, which I always remember laughing at when I was a child. He would put headphones on your head, plug it into it. He would then get you to speak into it, and what it was doing was recording your voice but playing it back 2 seconds later.
Yes.
Half a second later.
Right.
You try talking when you don't hear yourself until a half a second later.
Yeah.
So and as children, that was just wonderful. Of course, none of my friends had that. It was all very different. Anyway, so that's the backdrop I had. So to answer one of your questions, I'm sure was coming. What was the first thing I remember hearing? My fond memory. I was in pajamas. It was Christmas Day. It was in a house that we lived in, which actually was my mother's old house. We moved into it. She went into a home, and it was "Love Me Do" by the Beatles.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, brilliant.
And now, I'm not sure if I played it on here, would it come across to you? Because I could.
Well, the problem is that we even if we were to do that, we can't do that on a podcast.
No, of course.
Or it would be, but we both know the song, the music. I could always cut it out. But "Love Me Do," I think, was then. So if that was originally when it's only 62, I think it was the first single, wasn't it?
It was 62.
It could have been. Was it really? And so you remember? Oh, that's amazing. So you would have been of an age, definitely, to be able to remember that. And you were born in 54, 55.
Correct. So I have a sister who's still around, who's 5 years older than me. So then she would have been 13. So at a sort of critical age for pop music, as it was then. So it was hers, not mine. She had got it for Christmas. And of course, we played it on, I think, some fairly basic deck of some sort of dance set or something like that. One of these ones that took a few singles and dropped them down, etc.
Yeah. It's amazing the way that they stacked them up, if you remember. I mean, it's hard to believe, like a mechanical kind of, you'd have 6 or 7 discs there. The arm would be brought across and it'd all be plonking on top of one another. I have got, by the way, I got a I think it's the 1970s, might be very early 70s or late 60s copy of Electric Ladyland by Hendrix, the double album. But that confused the hell out of me the first time I played it. It was a little bit worse for wear, in as much as one of the discs is side 1 and side 4, A and D, and the other one is B and C, because even then they thought you might put the 2 albums
together. Very clever. Love it.
On top of one another, which it probably ruined so many fantastic pressings of that album, and others. But that's how they kind of did it at the time. So 62, that's right at the beginning of the Beatles then. And so it
was. And one of the things I find fascinating about today, not today specifically, but the life we live in today, is in preparation for our conversation, I thought, I'll just check the facts. I'm sure it was around sort of 60. I knew what age I was, but I wasn't quite 100% sure. So I looked it up.
Yeah.
Not only did I find exactly when it was recorded, where it was recorded, the fact that Ringo Starr didn't play the drums on that.
That's right.
Track. And you can also
there are versions with him on it. But the original one, wasn't him. It was a session drummer that they
Yes.
brought in, and there is also a version of it out there with Pete Best
Correct.
playing
Yeah.
on it, and and I think actually all three of them were on, I don't know, maybe one of the recent, or it might have been on one of the anthology albums, but
Yeah.
an incredible period of time, in my opinion. 1960, early 62, is it? Something like that.
Yeah. And the other thing that I
was
also,
17.
yes, the other thing I also found when doing that research was that there was also a PDF of the original piece of paper that McCartney wrote "Love Me Do" on,
All right.
by hand, and
Yeah.
it's just oh, geez, it. You're like me. You'll have looked a lot of stuff on the Beatles, and they are probably the only band that could do what they did and how they did it. They could go into a studio and record an entire album in 4 or 5 hours. Some of which they hadn't even written, but when they went in, and it's just,
it's of its time, and they built upon everything that had gone before them, because you could say they were very original, but they wouldn't have existed without Elvis or without the Everly Brothers in particular, where they learned their harmonies. I don't know, so there's a few locations, if you're interested in the Beatles, a few things that because I wasn't that interested in them as a young boy. I was more into Deep Purple and Jethro Tull, and the Beatles didn't exist when I was a teenager. You know what I mean? They'd broken up by that point. But I have been since. I've visited Abbey Road a couple of times. I've been to the studio there, which is well worth doing. Every now and again, they open it up. So I'd recommend you or anybody else listening or watching, put yourself on the mailing list, the newsletter for Abbey Road, because if you get the opportunity, I mean, it is spine-tingling. Just to go and stand on the steps is one thing. For a long time, I had considered, going on eBay and buying a Just Eat bib to pretend to be a kind of motorcyclist pizza delivery guy to try and get in that way. But as it is, I got in there. And the other one that I would again recommend doing is if you go to Liverpool, you can go to John Lennon's childhood home in Menlove Avenue, and you can go to Paul McCartney's childhood home in, I think it's Fourth Lynn Road.
Yeah,
and you can stand in the lobby. What would you call it? They wouldn't call it a lobby. You know what I mean? When you come in through the front door, there's a little place to put your shoes and your whatever in that little space between the front door and kind of going into the house.
Yeah,
that is where the two of them used to basically sit and kind of harmonize with one another. And once again, for me,
it's
very special.
And of course, at the time, being 8, introduced that sort of music because of an older sister. Had she not been around, then I guess maybe it would have passed me by. I would have been more interested in playing with other things. But because she was around and I was hearing it, I sort of got introduced to it. And that song, when I play it, brings back that memory.
Of course it does.
Christmas Day, in your pajamas, because that's what all happened. You got up early and all that sort of stuff when you were that young. And of course, Christmas lunch would have been a chicken.
Yes.
You only had chicken once a year. Well, it always makes me chuckle. And my father always bought a bottle of Sauternes, which he drank.
Hold on. Where's this? What kind of council estate is this? Where were you? On the outskirts of Paris?
No. We moved from the council estate in that year. In fact, we moved from the council estate into where my nan, as we called her.
Yes.
She got to the stage where she couldn't look after herself, so she wanted to go into a sort of a managed home. And she was fine. She went, and my father bought her house off her.
Gotcha.
And we went from a council house into a semi-detached.
To the middle classes. Your father started voting Conservative overnight and buying his Sauterne, whereas I was down in Wales at that time, and it was we'd be lucky if we get a party pack of Double Diamond, I think. You remember those kind of party cans or whatever. But
yes.
So you got a sister, an older sister, so she was a big influence then, and because it was her records you'd be listening to at that point. Then.
Well, it was, and again, the sort of pre suggestions that you sent, earlier in the week, it made me. I've written, 3 pages of notes on stuff. And
I hope you don't mind. I'm going to dip in and out through this selection. I'm not going to take them in your running order.
So one of the things that I was influenced was by my sister. So when I got to the age of 16, my father, who now was working for the Ford Motor Company, they moved their parts division from Averley, which is in Essex, sort of in towards London, almost the East End, and they moved it from there up to basically just outside Northampton, a place called Daventry.
You were living in East London. Were you Essex yourself at this point?
Essex. I lived in a place called Benfleet.
Okay, I know it. Yeah.
We'll probably go back to that at some point. So up in terms of other music influences or experiences, but and that involved me moving lock, stock and barrel with my two parents. My sister stayed down there up to Daventry and moving into a village, which we'll go on to talk about because that's another period of time that.
Right.
So
that's in the Midlands, then, is it? Is that?
Yes,
say Daventry is it Coventry Way? Is it that? Is it Stratford?
Yes, I actually moved to a village. So we actually moved to a village that is equidistant between Coventry and Banbury.
Right.
So north to south, Coventry north, Banbury in the south. In the middle, on the road that used to connect those two, is a little village called Southam. We'll come back to this Southam, but Southam, its only claim to fame was it had 10 pubs in it.
Right. Okay. Well, it's well equipped. But it's quite a musical part of the world as well, I think, though, isn't it? It's not Black Country, is it? But it's the Midlands.
No. It is the
Midlands.
It's got that awful accent, that sort of Birmingham sort of.
So Led Zeppelin were from that part of the world, weren't they? Or a couple of them were. Slade, Wolverhampton, Led Zeppelin, parts of Led Zeppelin. Sorry, were you grimacing at the mention of Slade there?
I did. Sorry, did it come across as a grimace?
All right, you like T-Rex, or were you couldn't handle the? No. Well, of course, you're a bit older at this point. You would have been you'd have been very disgusted with what was going on with glam in the 1970s. Sweet.
Oh no.
Yeah, so there's some good stuff there.
There's a whole period of, and I often say this when we're talking with friends about musical influences and experiences, that I found the whole 70s a complete nightmare, really.
Right.
Because the middle of the road pop stuff, I had no interest in whatsoever. No. Yeah. But it's not strictly true, because Led Zeppelin wouldn't regard as pop. So the mainstream, would have been on Top of the Pops, that sort of stuff. No interest in it whatsoever. Thought it was.
But would you watch Top of the Pops? Because by the way, I was born April 1964. Top of the Pops, I think, came into existence just before I was born. For the first 40 odd years of my life, Top of the Pops had always been in existence.
Yeah.
But for yourself, I don't know. Were you a at Thursday night, 7:20 BBC One? I mean, it was ritual in my kind of upbringing to kind of be sitting in front of the TV, watching the chart rundown, and watching.
In the 70s, probably not. In the 80s, probably.
In the 80s.
Yeah, I think again, we'll go on to what influences or what music did I listen to in sort of decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000.
All right.
And the 80s, it came back for me in terms of mainstream music,
right?
Stuff that normal people would listen to. But in the 70s, I'm listening to Mahavishnu and John McLaughlin.
No,
and people think I'm mad because well, they probably did, but for me,
John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu is a little bit bonkers, and I have couple of albums, and I've seen John McLaughlin play, but probably in the 90s, I think. I saw him play at the Royal Festival Hall. He's a blistering, phenomenal guitarist, but I would still prefer to listen to just Richie Blackmore playing a couple of notes, or a rock guitar player, a blues player, a Gary Moore or somebody like that. I'd rather listen to that. I've got I can't remember one of the famous Mahavishnu album, but that is it's at times it's cacophony, it's a noise. You know what I mean? They could really create a massive noise. But it's jazz, was it?
It is, yeah. So if you go back to my beginnings, I was brought up with Lionel Hampton,
Oscar Peterson,
which was basically Miles Davis. It's all just off the wall,
And John McLaughlin played for Miles Davis too.
Yeah, and so when there was an element of my life, I think, as well, where you find yourself And it didn't happen for me and my children, but it certainly happened for me and my father, where the musical appreciation is just the gap was just getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
Because he just saw Beatles as rubbish and noisy and all that sort of Rolling Stones, which I had no real time for, although I did go and see them. But whereas as I was getting older into my 20s, I thought, I don't know if Dad would like this, because McLaughlin, some of it was just off the wall, but some of it you could think, oh, there's an element of Miles Davis, there's a bit of...
Well, there was tremendous musicianship there, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so let me guess a few others on it. So maybe Santana would have been, because there was, I think there was John McLaughlin in colour. Santana did, was it Love, Devotion and Surrender? There was an album of the two of them in white suit. that again, religious, devotional music, I think, what they were kind of doing at that point. So if maybe Jeff Beck, would that have been? Yeah, okay.
It's interesting. For me, with Jeff Beck, I came to him later in his career, as opposed to earlier. I've seen him a couple of times. I saw him at Ronnie Scott's.
Oh no!
When you're close up, and to see him using that fingernail on his thumb, and using that as a plectrum. I mean, that style.
When was that? Because there's a famous one of him at Ronnie Scott's with Vinnie Colaiuta on drums. That was one of the in his later years. It couldn't have been one of those shows. Was it with Tal? I can't remember, the lady on bass. Yep, you were there.
A friend of mine who to this day I still don't know how he got the tickets, but Robert, a good friend of mine, said, "Oh, we got some tickets. Let's go and see." Okay, and even then, had it been McLaughlin, absolutely, you would have had to stop me running straight away to go to see it. But and I thought, Jeff Beck. But having seen him, I then went into him, and I tend to do this with certain styles today. That let's go and. Because of what's on the internet and the way you can listen to music, are we allowed to say names? I guess we can say names. Like Spotify.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
I find Spotify, and we're going off piste here, but I find Spotify brilliant because it exposes me to people I've never heard of, and yet, wow, that's really good. I love it. And I've found myself listening to different genres, styles, ages, people, whatever it happens to be, types of music, because it's just come up on one of these, here's a list of music, what do you think? And I'll just press and have a listen, and that's good. And I can't name names now because nothing slaps me in the face to remind me, but Snarky Puppy would have come up in that.
Well, if you do the I quite like on they do it on Spotify and on Tidal, but if you find a track that you like, you can then go on to kind of track radio, and it'll then give you songs that it thinks are kind of like it. And Spotify also recently put there's an AI DJ on there, which he talks as well. But last I played it again on one of my Friday night is music nights in this room here. So the music is cranked right up in here, and it was playing. It kind of said you haven't played this. It said you haven't played this for a long time, but then he played about 5 or 6 tracks that I probably hadn't played for 5 or 6 years from Todd Rundgren, and it was wonderful, absolutely fantastic. So tell me more about those 70s acts then. So if it was so who else would be around that? Zappa.
So go back to the beginning. So Love Me Do. My first single that I ever bought was Ice in the Sun by Status Quo.
Right, I don't know the song, but Quo are a good band.
No, so this is. I had no time for Quo when they went into bar chords and all that stuff. But Ice in the Sun, for whatever reason, just sort of flicked a switch, and I remember going out and buying it and playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it. Anyway, moving on from that.
Was that kind of psychedelic then? Was it? Was Pictures of Matchstick Men is a bit
sort of like that.
Right.
I mean, I would play it, but we can't. But it sort of rung a bell at the time. But then I had a friend called Chubby. He wasn't chubby by any stretch of the imagination, but for some reason he got a nickname Chubby. And Chubby bought the Electric Ladyland album, I think mainly because of the ladies had very few clothes on at the time. I think, quite frankly, that was his only reason for buying it. And
it's more than possible.
More than possible. Because now I'm probably, sort of 14, 15, and listening to that thinking, wow,
No.
wow, that's and I do remember going on in years later, watching interviews where people said they saw Hendrix in a club in New York, and there were all the the Claptons and you know who in the audience.
Yes.
Sit there going, I might as well not bother.
Correct.
I might as well just hack up. And when you sort of understand that, you think, well, that's quite significant, because Clapton was good. I was a fan of Cream and Blind Faith and everything else. For him to say that, you think, well, he must be good. And then when you actually stop and actually look at him play, and now you can look at him on YouTube and all that sort of stuff, playing live, the guy was just it's not say one-off, but his style was his, absolutely. Yes. And it's one thing I told my my youngest son, who went on to become potentially a bass guitarist of some quality, but never took it any further. But that's by the by. But he was told by his bass teacher, if you want to really, really become a session musician, because they're the ultimate musicians, you have to and effectively do what Hendrix did. You play in bands, you play on cruises, you play in anything and everything, you play every style, you just play and play and play and practice. I watched recently a video on Stevie Ray Vaughan, who's actually was sadly not with us anymore, but was the same age as me almost to the day. He spent, older brother who played as well, but he just spent weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks practicing. And it's amazing how good you get the more you practice.
Well, it's an interesting thing you bring up there. The other thing that came to mind is Jaco Pastorius. I don't know if I ever listened to much. So Jaco also, he what they call, I think the word is wood shedding, which is basically practice. And but so I played the guitar from the age of 8. I've got my accoutrements here around me. I think at a time, I still like to think I'm very musical. I'm Welsh, so I'm kind of.
So you think you can sing?
I was, and I can. Don't tempt me, or I'll start.
Don't start.
But I watched the other night. I don't know why I did it. I found something on YouTube. I just watched a guy doing guitar practice for 2.5 hours. So it was literally, he just recorded himself trying basically to master like a Django Reinhardt, because he had one of those kind of gypsy guitars. But it really set me off thinking, because the mistake I always made is, because I'm musical and I could generally pick up, and I could do it. I can pick up whatever instrument. I can probably work out how to get a tune out of it pretty quickly, just by ear. But if it didn't come to me quickly, I didn't pursue it. And whereas this guy, 2.5 hours of him just going, what practice is like. It goes wrong, maybe gets a little bit up, and then he goes again and again and again. I never did the practice. And it must be the same with we do golf. Golf has got to be the same type of thing, isn't it? The guys who are at the top of the tree.
Oh God, yeah.
They're the ones who did forget the 10,000 hours. They did the 100,000 hours by the time they were 18.
Yes.
And again, they would go back to the Beatles on that one, Glenn. If you've, I don't know if you've read the. I'd really recommend also the Mark Lewinson book. I don't know if you've come across that. So Mark Lewinson is regarded. I think it's Tunes in the Park, whatever it is. It's like an 800 or 900 page Beatles biography.
Oh, okay, right.
He is effectively the Beatles kind of archivist today.
Right.
He's worked so extensively with them over the last 20 odd years. This book just covers him up to 1962. He's got another book coming out hopefully this year, which will go from like 62 to 65, and then another book to take them. That's his kind of life's work. But I really like reading about the ins and outs of it. And the Beatles, we do know when they went to Hamburg, they were playing, I can't remember what it was, but it was basically 7 or 8 hours a night. off their faces on speed.
Yeah.
But they did that for something like 3 months, and they supposedly came back and just blew everyone away because of the practice.
Practice, yeah, absolutely. Well,
But
go back to my youngest son, who's taught bass at his school, and the guy who taught him was the guy who plays with Tony Handley, as in what's the song?
Spandau Ballet.
Spandau Ballet. He goes on tour with him. He also does, cruises and all that sort of stuff. He would come in, I think twice a week to the school that the Nathan was at, and they would pick a tune, and it would be something from Jaco Pastorius, because they are a challenge, and they would just turn it right down, same tone, but slow it. And then you could just play it, and just rather than trying to play it live, I think, I can't keep up with it. Slow it right down, and then you could just. So when Nathan's for his 21st, we had a bass guitar made for him. He didn't want a car. His older brother had a car when he got to 21. Nathan had a bass guitar made. If you ever want to look at good bass guitars, look up a guy called Bernie Goodfellow.
Right, British.
Who's based in Brighton. He makes all the bass guitars for the Flea, which is in Red Hot Chili Peppers. Mark Thingy from Level 42. Anyone who plays bass in this country certainly will get Bernie to make them one. And the reason that Bernie's good at it is his electronics is as much as anything that's inside.
Right. Wow.
So Nathan had that made for him. He went on to play with a few bands, but then life took over and all that sort of stuff. But I do remember that thinking, well, and I wish I'd had it when because I played in a band, back in my late teens, early 20s. And having the ability to slow stuff down and listen to it, think, I can get that now.
Well, the thing is, we probably, if you put a 45 RPM single on at 33, I think it does take it down an octave. I never even thought of it. I've no idea why, but that's what people did. And people with tapes, apparently that is what they did. But even then, as I said, if I learned a riff, if it didn't come to me quickly, for whatever reason, I just kind of skipped over it. And I do regret that. But so did you want to be a rock star growing up? Did you also, you at one point, growing your hair and in a band?
Yes. Take you back to the village in Warwickshire, in between Coventry and Banbury, middle of nowhere, claim to fame 10 pubs. I did manage to master a pint in each on a Saturday night and still walk home. But there's not a lot to do. So myself and a couple of friends, one of which is sadly no longer with us. The other one is an emeritus professor in dentistry, just got his MBE. We set up a folk group.
Right.
Because there's not much else you could do in that part of the world. So we would play a lot of Lindisfarne, a lot of standard, folk stuff. Bit of
Fairport Convention. Lovely.
That sort of stuff, So Frank and I mainly would practice. Ted, who was a bit older than us, played for the Birmingham Philharmonic Orchestra, could pick up a violin and play anything. We just told him to play it in this key and off he'd go, he'd play. So Frank and I would spend, most nights around each other's houses practicing. I had a 12, still got it, an Echo 12 string.
The classic Eco 12 string, which I think my brother had one. It built like brick shit houses, basically, isn't it?
It's still playable. I only have it as a 6 string now, which makes it slightly easier to play because it's got a wider neck for 6 string.
Yeah. But the first strum on a 12 string is like, what?
I know. So we eventually went and played our first gig down in Stratford-on-Avon. We then got some other gigs elsewhere, and a long story short, we started our own folk club in Southam in one of the pubs, the Black Dog. That went on for about 3 years. At our peak, I think we had Jasper Carrot come one night.
Right.
And do a slot. He was the main guest.
He's from that part of the world, wasn't he?
He was, Coventry and stuff. We'd have people come on and, would turn up with a guitar. Can I play? Yeah, sure. We'd open it. First half, we'd open the second half. Then at the end would be the guest. And blah, blah. And we'd have to pay them, and we took money on the door, and it was great. And it was my exposure to being a bit of a local no
musical
band.
entrepreneur as well, really. At that point, as you said, you're a musician, but also what you're saying there is a kind of
Yep.
club owner. You know what I mean? An agent.
Yeah.
No, so it's a nice spot to be. I don't suppose, and there was a little bit of cash in it, but I don't suppose it was gonna get you very far lifestyle wise. But for a while, it was a very good lifestyle business where you're basically in the music business, I think, aren't you, at that point? So,
and we would still get invited to go out to other places. I do remember one particular evening at a pub just outside Stratford-on-Avon. Can't for the life remember what it was called. We were the main guests, so we were the beyond at the end, and I knew we had a huge, great catalogue of stuff we could do. I mean, we could all rattle something out. And I remember being up on the stage. We probably started at about 10. The old till came out the pub landlord took the tills out, locked the door. It went on to about midnight, half midnight. And while we're up there, people are going to the bar getting drinks, and they'd sort of nod and wave. You know, would you like a drink? So yeah.
All right.
We'd come off the stage and we'd have about 6 pints each.
Brilliant.
On the bar waiting for us. And inevitably, you know, you can't waste 6 pints of beer. So.
Of rather weak Midlands beer.
Sadly, you're absolutely right. But it was all there was. And Michelin butlers and getting absolutely larruped, but being up there for probably 2 hours and getting all that adoration's the wrong word. We didn't have girls throwing knickers at us, but people who just appreciated and had a good night.
Oh, wonderful.
And enjoyed it. And you got a lot of, lots of...
No, it's wonderful. I saw on Facebook the other night, I saw a guy back in Swansea. He was on Facebook, Brian Breeze. I don't suppose you would know him, but he played with Man at one point. They were a very well-known Welsh band. Man on your list, by any chance?
Mine is on my list. It's in red because it's Welsh as well.
But he passed away. He was very influential on me. The first time I went to a place called the Coach House, which is a pub, a kind of music pub, not anymore, but it's a music pub in Swansea in Wine Street. Back in I think 1976, 77, downstairs in the basement. You wouldn't believe the basement. One set of rickety steps in, no other way out. So clearly it wouldn't even exist today. There's no fire escape. Sweat coming down the walls. Classic, pub basement. And he was in there playing with a band called the Trembling Knees. The Trembling Knees were just the tightest pub rock band I've ever heard. And Brian Breeze, blistering lead guitar, and as I say, as a young lad, a pint of beer in my hand, cigarette in the other, and extraordinary. And so that's one of those, to me, those musical moments that will remain with me. As I say, saddened to see that he literally passed away, I think, in the last week.
Right.
But big impact. And the pub rock, pub music. Again, I would really, I feel for the kids today. Yes, they've got Spotify. They've got access to all the music the world has ever produced, free, effectively. You know what I mean? If you're prepared to listen to an advert, but even if you pay £10 a month, you get access to everything, no adverts, extraordinary value. But at the same time, if they live in any of the places you're talking about now, on a Friday night they wanted to go see a live band, it's unlikely they're going to have an opportunity to do it. There'll be no bands to go and see. Live music at that level, I think, it was in decline for a long time. They started getting duos in rather than bands because a band was a bit noisy, and so on and on it went. But where we are today, and I think the world is poorer for it. I really do. But there we are. It's just me once again harking back to the past, and as I say, and seeing it as superior to how it is today. It's not necessarily superior. It's different. I prefer it, and I'm glad I got what I got, as I'm sure you did.
Well, I think I'm the same as you in the sense that I love going to live. I don't do it probably as much as I probably could do, should do, but like you, I can sit there and appreciate the talent.
Yes.
When you're sat there, even when I used to go to Worcester Park, there's an old pub in Worcester Park I used to go to with a friend, and we used to see a band called the Hamsters.
Oh, they were well known, the Hamsters, isn't it? Are they, again?
they've all retired now. I think the
Yeah.
drummer had a heart attack and survived, but he couldn't play drums anymore. But I remember
Were they a
taking my
biker band? Were they a greaser? For a kind of.
No, well, they weren't when I saw them. You can still get access to their music, I think, on Spotify. I may be wrong, but I bought CDs when I saw them at some point.
Right.
But these were guys probably in their mid-late 50s, maybe in 60s. It was classic, Hendrix combo guitar,
Yes,
bass,
yes.
drum, and the guitarist, his interpretation of Voodoo Child and All Along the Watchtower,
right?
His interpretation of it, yes, absolutely fantastic.
I have heard of them.
You stand there because you have to stand. You stand there and watch him, just in awe, thinking. And he used to he'd get on the stage, and he'd be warming up. He'd get out the tin of 3-in-1 oil,
right?
Flatten his fretboard and go down the fretboard with oil, rub it all in, and that was his way of not bugging up his fingers and keeping going all night.
Well, they definitely say. I'm sure I remember they would have been like a festival band, where Stonehenge Festival, yes. Reading. Yeah, they were again well known, as said, as a band that could do an entire set of Hendrix and probably Groundhogs and
ZZ
I don't know.
Top.
Kind of, right. Okay.
Gotcha. Was there other one?
I never saw them, but that'd be good to see.
Very good. And to me, it was just because when you went there, if you got there early, you stood at the front and you would literally be a meter away from him, so you could actually see what he was doing. Whereas when I've seen Satriani from a distance, you're thinking, I can't really see what he's doing. But with this guy, you're right in his face, and you think, what talent? I mean, it's just to be able to do that, just in your own time, playing at home, thinking, well, wouldn't that be great?
Practice goes a long way towards it. You sent me a link of some lady I've never really heard a girl playing the guitar. I mean, it was just mind blowing, extraordinary playing there. But you saw Jeff Beck. You saw Jeff Beck at Ronnie Scott's. I want to reach through and touch you through the camera at that point to get some proximity towards Jeff Beck. Was he possibly? Many would say he was possibly at his peak at that point. He wasn't a young man by any standard, but he hadn't declined in any way, shape, or form. No. He probably had physically, but you wouldn't notice it. He wasn't the strong, strapping man he would have been as a young. But his guitar playing, his technique was breathtaking. Who else have you seen then? So you said Satriani. Yes, I've seen Satriani a couple of times. You like going to see guitarists then?
One of the influences that it's on my list. There's two, I suppose, that I mentioned. One was my sister. Beyond the sort of Love Me Do and etc. She stayed in Essex, and I went up to the Midlands. But I would go down and stay with her and her husband, who she's still married to, and listen to their music. So let me just rattle off the sort of things we would listen to, because smoking dope and all that sort of stuff in their flat in Southend. It would be Spooky Tooth, Wishbone Ash, yes, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Family, Santana, Man,
yes,
Nice, what's his name?
Keith Emerson.
Keith Emerson in his early days, Frank Zappa, a bit of Beach Boys, bit of Cream, a bit of Steel Eye Span, bit of Neil Young, and that stuff would be on the record player. I think my brother-in-law, who worked for Shell at the time, who was earning good money, he was doing shifts, working on it. So he got quite some fancy sort of quite big wooden thing,
good stereo.
Yeah, good stereo. Big speakers. Lived in an old Victorian house in Southend, so good acoustics. And we'd sit there. I wasn't a great one for smoking dope, but my sister and my brother-in-law were.
They were. I like the sound of them. They sound like nice people.
It sort of made me feel sick most of the time, so I didn't bother, which maybe was a good thing.
Well, even if you're in the room there, but I say that, but the vibes you're giving off. I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know, was there a lava lamp in the room as well? By the way, it's probably lit similarly to what we have here.
If it wasn't a lava lamp, it would be a bottle of what was it? Black Tower with a candle in.
Black. I was thinking maybe the Matthias Rose, maybe instead.
Or
Matthias Rose,
Blue Note.
Liebfraumisch. And also, when you went through to the kitchen, was there no door, but they had those beads? Do you know those kind of?
Yeah, I think I'm having a flashback now.
No, but I'd say those were. I say it's very evocative. Even just the music you're saying. I don't know all of those bands. Family. Who are the early ones you mentioned there? Just go by that list again.
Spooky Tooth.
Spooky Tooth. Is that Peter Frampton? Is it?
No. I can't think of who the names were. Names that probably don't exist anymore. I know they might do somewhere. About a 2-album group. That's about all they did.
Right.
Wishbone Ash. I think there's
Wishbone Ash. I've got Argus.
Still going. Yeah, Argus.
I've got Argus, which is cracking. It really is a good album.
Yes, we all loved Yes. Wild stuff that was 6, 7, 8 minutes long. Especially the early stuff was good. It went a bit wild towards the end. Crosby, Stills and Nash, you can't go wrong with.
Well, you can go wrong with Crosby, Stills and Nash. I don't know. Do you know Andy Chadzik? Do you know Andy?
Yeah.
So I used to be a computer center. So he's got. I go see quite a lot of gigs with Andy. We're going to see the Eagles and Steely Dan.
Oh, okay.
They're coming to Manchester shortly. On the gig front, before I come back to the Crosby, Stills and Nash thing, I just saw that Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets are playing in the Albert Hall in June. That's the closest one to me. Do you fancy going to that, or
not a fan of Saucer Full of Secrets? I'm more metal, and then Wish You Were Here and.
Well, I went to see last year. I went to see. I went to the O2 and did see the big Roger Waters show, and then I went to the Palladium. We got tickets to go and see him do Dark Side of the Moon Redux, which is a very intimate show. So it was great. It was a great night.
Yes,
and we had a super time there. So I was going to say, Andy Chadzik, it's Crosby, Stills and Nash. He hits it for, is it our house? It's a very, it's just the most twee. And he's right. There's so much other stuff that they do that is just beautiful sounding, but then Our House, it's catchy as can be, but it just reeks of a gas commercial or whatever. So,
they weren't. If I go back to that period of going down to see my sister and listening to her music, which obviously became my music, it was probably Yes, Wishbone Ash, Family, which is Roger. What's his name? The singer, very, very gravelly voice. It'll come to me.
Right.
Frank Zappa.
Which Zappa albums do you know?
Well, the one that was the one with Hot Rats.
All right. Okay. Well, that was on the last.
Captain Beefheart coming out of
got a bit of Captain Beefheart on that album, and it said it's got Peaches on Regalia. So it's early Zappa, and I got into him a little bit later. But also, if you think about it, our musical world, in terms of its potential, was very limited at that time. You only really got whatever was in the local record shop, maybe what you heard on the radio. And when you compare it to today, where I'd say on Spotify, you get music from all over the world. That's all that's been recorded, over the last however many years. But it's interesting to me as to how some of those bands, I'm not even sure that given today, that whether they would even be successful. It's just that they were only a handful of bands. You went to a record shop, you went through, there was, I don't know how many albums there were. You think of the album covers that you would see, how many amount of times I would have flicked through and I would have seen Wish One Has Argus, and I might have seen, say, a Man. 2 ounces. Is it 2 ounces of plastic with a hole in the middle, or is that? I'm just trying to think if that's budgie.
Rhinos and Winos is the one I remember.
Rhinos and Winos, right? Well, Rhinos and Winos doesn't that have the cover with? It's in a hippie DOS room, isn't it? That's right. Well, the band that I mentioned earlier, the Trembling Knees, Clint, the basically one of the guys in Man, at that era, one of the founders of Man, he was playing the keyboards for the Trembling Knees that night when Brian Breeze was playing. I should have. It's terrible to think about it, but I was only interested in bands that kind of existed at the same time as I was growing up. Man, I think, had pretty much done their pieces by early mid 1970s, although they reformed and the usual kind of stuff. But even as a Welshman, for some reason, I wasn't introduced to them at all, other than I started listening to them about 10 or 12 years ago. And since then, I went to I've seen Deke Leonard on a number of occasions, and again had a lovely, and actually on one occasion it was Deke Leonard and Brian Breeze at the same place at the same time. So it was a double bubble for me. But I like who have you met? You've seen these bands. Have you had the opportunity to meet any of your they say it's a worry, be careful of meeting your heroes. Have you?
Yes.
Have you had any opportunities of that?
No, the nearest I got was sitting next to Nick Mason. We were both waiting to meet our financial advisors. I'm sure his financial advisor was much more interested in meeting him than mine was of me. But
well, it says something that you were in, in the same waiting room. So I'm impressed.
A man who made more money, believe it or not, selling his Ferraris and his sports cars than he ever did with Pink Floyd. And he must have made a lot of money with Pink Floyd.
He was a big Ferrari, but they lost a lot of money in the 70s, if you remember. They were prone to they got badly ripped off.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You sat close to him, but given the opportunity to go and see him at the Albert Hall, just not interested.
Well, so it's because, it's true. It's because that era of them. I came in at sort of Ummagumma, and then.
Is that Medal? Is that round there? Is it? And what?
What was after Ummagumma? It was the one with the picture of Echoes. So Ummagumma, Echoes, and Beyond was where I came.
That's Medal, I think that album is. Isn't it the one like with an ear? Is that the one? Right, okay.
And I saw them in '75 at Nebworth, doing "Wish You Were Here." Doing "Dark Side of the Moon," and. Absolutely fabulous. And I still listen to it. I went to Vietnam about this time last year. Long flight, as you can imagine, going to Ho Chi Minh or Saigon, as we used to call it.
Right.
I listened to all of Medal, all of Dark Side of the Moon, and all of Wish You Were Here on my Bose doodahs, and it was. And it's something you don't do. Back to what you've been saying, we all dip in and out of Spotify, and you just pick different tracks.
Yes.
Where we were both brought up with, you put the needle down at the start, and it went through to the end.
That's right.
Because you didn't want to pick it up and move it because you're going to scratch it, so that's not a good idea.
And I think I mentioned on one of the other chats I had, it said there's this young lad that I follow on Twitter called Billy Edwards, and he is in Cardiff University, so he's like 21 years old.
Yeah.
Buys a lot of secondhand vinyl, a lot of secondhand CDs, but in an obsessive way. So he's just kind of he'll go out and he'll buy 15 secondhand CDs on a Friday, 20 on a Saturday. He must have thousands of them, and I take my hat off to him because his knowledge of particularly of our era of music as well. Because a lot of stuff of what he's buying is I would have said 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Really? Wow.
It's not beyond that in my mind. So he's got this huge collection. But then you tell me, how much time will he ever have been able to invest in any one of those records? And that to me was, the taking of an album, the religious experience of putting it on, as you said, the sound of the vinyl, and then opening the album cover.
Oh.
And if it was a Yes album cover, it had artwork by Roger Dean, if you might remember.
Correct.
And even, I'm just trying to think, the Beatles were one of the first to put lyrics. I think actually
Sgt.
Pepper's had lyrics on the album, was perhaps the first album to have that. But you would have listened to it and played it over and 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 over again. And I know for a fact that if you only listen to an album 2 or 3 times, you may never come back to it again. I mean, it just hasn't grabbed. It hasn't had an opportunity.
Grip you. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Right. And it's and going back to the flight to Vietnam, I was starting to get I know what's coming next, because it's in here. It's in here.
Sure.
Whereas the kids today have got no idea. They don't listen to an album.
AC/DC about 10 years ago, because I remember reading it I think it might have been, I was reading a newspaper at the time, because I don't read a newspaper too often anymore. No. I remember reading some article about AC/DC were refusing to sell their music via Apple at the time, iTunes. Right. Remember, if you think about the evolution, before we had Spotify, you may have used iTunes. You may have had
Yep.
an iPod, and that meant you could burn your CDs effectively, couldn't you? You could burn a CD kind of onto it, or you could buy stuff on the iTunes store.
Yeah.
But in buying stuff on the iTunes store, I thought I was impressed at the time because AC/DC at some point they really held out for a long time. They refused. They as far as they were concerned, the album had been created to be played from start. You know what I mean? Track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then turn over if whatever it was, up from 1 to 10. I think he didn't like the idea of just cherry picking, you know, kind of Highway to Hell. Thank you very much. That's all I want.
Yeah.
And they held out. So we did the local record shop down here. I'm going to give them a plug here actually, because I'm wondering as to whether David's Music in Letchworth will actually begin to sponsor the Musical Differences podcast. I was there today. I bought 3 albums today, by the way. These were today. I bought. You probably like that.
Very good.
Got into Tears for Fears.
Good.
This was there on sale, 15 quid. Steely Dan.
Yeah, very good.
Steely Dan. Here's one that he won't have seen before.
Rugged
Ditties, this is called. It was £1 in the second-hand section, but you believe it or not, it does have on it track 6, side 1, 4 and 20 Virgins. I felt I had to buy it because stuff like that is going to disappear down the memory hole if it hasn't already gone down there. But as I said, they're a local shop, and at the time we did. In tribute to AC/DC, I think AC/DC might have had a new album coming out at the time. They did a kind of AC/DC day, and we had kids coming in with their guitars, with their competitions to see who could do the best. I think it may have been. Just trying. A whole lot of Rosie might have been the kind of top track played on the day, but all these young guitarists coming in and playing. And I've seen. I never saw them. I would say I never saw them. I have seen them, but I would, at the same time as having seen them, I would say I never saw them. I saw AC/DC 6 years ago, you know what I mean, as a stadium rock band in their 50s and 60s, whereas AC/DC, if you go onto YouTube and you look, but there's some examples on YouTube of them with Bon Scott back in kind of Rock Goes to College. You remember that TV program?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Though I'd love to have seen something like that, but never got to see those. So you haven't met any of your. I did meet Richie Blackmore once, and he was very kind. He was very good, and he's probably one of my favorite guitarists. What about Richie? You haven't even mentioned. We're an hour in, and you haven't mentioned Deep Purple. What's going on?
See, that to me is the 70s. You know, I'm in Southam in the middle of nowhere, and middle of the road type music just didn't float my boat. So I resorted to the Mahavishnu's, Pink Floyd's, a bit of Lindisfarne. What's on my list? The sensational Alex Harvey band. Right.
Okay. Again, drug fueled. Seriously, drug fueled, wasn't it?
One hit wonder.
Delilah was the big one, wasn't it? And then I like. Is it something healer? Faith Healer.
Faith Healer. Very good.
Faith Healer's awesome.
But I also listened to a guy called Jean Luponti, who was a electronic violinist.
Played with Zappa. You mentioned there. We just don't about you mentioned Groundhogs. I never kind of exposed myself much to that, but I know people who really Groundhogs are like, you know, number one on their list type of thing. Were you big into them?
A couple of tracks were quite good.
All right, okay.
Nothing brilliant. Then people like Alan Parsons Project, Manfred Mann, a band that really did float my boat at the time. I just moved into a flat in Leamington Spa, and this album came out from a band called Metro. Duncan Brown and 2 other guys. Just, if you get a chance, go look for it.
I'm going to look for it, but I have a feeling that it's something to do with you moving into the new flat in Leamington Spa. And you know what I mean? This being perhaps a new piece of music in a new environment or something. But I've never heard of that. I was hoping. I wondered there as to whether you were going to. You're gonna go Bebop Deluxe, but I don't even know whether you ever listened to it. I've listened to Bebop Deluxe.
You ever listened to Brand X?
Years. Brand X. I saw Brand X once, and Bruford on the same bill.
Yeah, right. Bill
I think it was Bruford and Brand X back in Swansea University. Not that I was at the university. Well, I was actually, but I was working in the computer department,
Right.
under the floor, pulling cables from one end to the other, only for a few weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's, yes, I would say Brand X. That's you can see there, and John Luke Ponty as well. Actually, you can see, and I would say the Zappa album. That is your Mahavishnu kind of
Jazz,
stuff.
jazzy,
Absolutely,
funky
jazz fusion.
fusion.
So, and of course, you and I bumped into each other at
Snarky Puppy.
Fast forward 40 years.
Yeah.
But that's a bizarre one. I don't know how you came across Snarky Puppy. I was in a bar in Fargo, North Dakota, which I said is where my son now lives. I was in a bar.
Right.
There's just this music playing. It's just like, this sound is incredible. There was a DJ, you know what I mean, and just some stuff playing in a restaurant, a bar restaurant, kind of, like it is in the US, lively bar. And I thought it sounded to me like Steps Ahead. I don't know if you remember Steps Ahead, Mike Manieri. If you've not heard Steps Ahead, there's some stuff. If you like and he said, no, Snarky Puppy. And I went up to I was at the hotel room, checked online.
Yeah.
First time I'd found out about Snarky Puppy, and I think I might have, within half an hour, bought a ticket to come and see them at the Hammersmith Odeon when I got home.
I can't remember. I think I was on YouTube looking at something totally unrelated, and then there was this video of them when they're in a recording studio.
Yeah, I know the one. They're all headphoned up. They've got a brass section. People are there listening to them as well. They've all got headphones on, but it's the same. I saw the same thing.
I can't remember the
something
track.
About home. Is it Find Me Home or Take Me Home or?
Yes, I think it might be. And when the guitarist, the drummer's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And when the guitarist, who's is Michael Lettieri, I can't pronounce his name, Lettieri, who I've gone on to listen to his music as well. When he plays that, and to me, that is the epitome of a session musician.
Yes,
I agree. Such talent with such accuracy.
Yes, yeah.
It's not a young lad, like you who learned it in the bedroom and you just got better because you practiced. That guy is just sheer talent.
Correct.
And he does it with such ease. It's like, I saw him again. I saw Snarky Puppy again at Wembley Arena last year.
Wow, I mean, Wembley Arena. I was impressed, to go and see them at that gig in Hammersmith Odeon and to see so many young people there.
Yes,
because it was downstairs, if you remember, it didn't even have seats. It was basically, they took the seats out, and they were really, the crowd were going for it. I was really blown away.
Well, we unfortunately we went. England women were playing America women at Wembley Stadium, so it was very busy. But when we got in, soaking wet because it was pissing down. We went through. They played most of their usual tracks. We had good seats, quite near the front, but up on looking down.
Yeah.
And Lettieri played a solo towards the end. Just mind blowing. He was on form. It was just, you could feel the tingles. You thought, this guy was so good. So
good to get the tingles if it's at Wembley. I can't say I've ever seen a gig that I've been blown away by as a venue. Not my favourite. I like Hammersmith. I still call it Hammersmith Odeon.
Yeah.
I like there. Ronnie Scott's I like. And so I'm going to, there's 2 gigs coming up again, Ronnie Scott's. I'm going to see Mike Stern in a couple of months' time. Do you know Mike Stern? Mike Stern he's got Dennis Chambers on drums. If you have John Schofield, I go back to a time I used to go to the Town and Country Club again, late 80s, early 90s. John Schofield with Dennis Chambers, they were probably in their prime at that point. But I got that coming up. And have you seen this Guthrie Govan? You must have seen him play. He's coming up in a couple of months in Ronnie's.
The only other person I've seen at Ronnie's is Martin Taylor.
Oh, right, okay. He's a phenomenal player, I bet, yeah.
If you read his story, he picked up the guitar, as a very young child, and was listening to music. Now, I can't for the life of me think who he was listening to. It might have been Django Reinhardt, it might have been someone else of that era.
Yeah, got to be that. Yeah.
What he was actually listening to was two guitars, but at the time he didn't realise it. So he was trying to teach himself what effectively was two guitars, which is why he's developed such a style that is almost like two guitars playing. Because he was
see his son on
using his other fingers, you know, and creating a sound that is. And I've seen him 3 times now,
right,
in different venues. He's just.
I've got some of his stuff. I've not seen him. I follow his son on LinkedIn. His son is a conference speaker.
Oh, okay.
I just can't remember his Christian name. It's something Taylor, but he flies all over the world. But he seems to have taken his father's professionalism, because I mean that man, he can literally travel the world just with a guitar and a case.
Yes.
And he's in New York, and he'll rock up at you know whatever the best jazz club is in town, and there'll be a trio there, and
and
off they go. Breathtaking. What about Pat Metheny?
My younger son keeps sending me tracks of him, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's okay, it's not bad.
Right,
I'm still more of a Martin Taylor, but.
Are you right? Because that's very different. Martin Taylor to me, in my mind, because the style of guitar he has. But if he's not Django Reinhardt, because he played didn't he play in Stefan Graffelli's Hot Club, or whatever they are? So I see it as that type of that kind of jazz. Whereas Pat Metheny, and I've seen Pat Metheny at. I sat with Ed Kenny. We went to see. Pat Metheny at Ronnie's. We're sitting here. Pat Metheny literally is about 8 to 10 feet away, and me and Ed are eating burger and chips. It just feels not right.
It's really not right. You should be sent out.
Yes, we should be. What about Steve Vai? Do you like? You must. If you see Steve, Joe Satriani, you must. Steve Vai.
I always thought that Steve Vai was a Satriani copy, and I preferred the real thing. So I stuck with Satriani.
Right. Satriani was his teacher, by the way, if you didn't know.
Yes, precisely.
Right, yes.
So I always thought, I'll stick with him, and that, talking about influences, as we sort of alluded to that we might do. My son's music. I have a 41-year-old and a 36-year-old, and their music as they were getting older, and this is the difference between me and my father and them and their father, is that I love their music. So, I find myself, listening to sort of Nirvana and Muse, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Green Day, Blink-182, Kings of Leon, Block Party, and, Bombay Bicycle Club, to name but a few. Because
all of those, I've got 1 or 2 tracks that I would say are stand out. Absolutely.
Yes. And it is mainly tracks, because the boys would have the CD. If Dad went to the States, I'd buy them CDs, because they're a darn sight cheaper in the US. Bring a suitcase back, for them.
Tower Records. You might go to Tower Records. We're traveling overseas. You might go to a big, huge tower. I mean, that's another thing. It's gone. That's gone.
It is. I know. So my first LP, we never got around to asking that one. My first LP was, I worked in Fenchurch Street in London. I was a 16-year-old. I'd left school with not a lot. I'd got dyslexia, but no one ever spotted it. But anyway, went to work in an insurance company in Fenchurch Street. You go out at lunchtime with your luncheon vouchers, have a spot of lunch, and go to the record store, because there wasn't much else to do. There was no sort of retail outlets to go to like there might be today.
Yeah,
I remember going in there, and to this day, and going through as you do, and pulling out King Crimson.
Which one? Court of the Crimson King, is it?
Yes, the only one. Because what else is there? There's only one. And looking at going and just blown away by the
what an album
cover.
The cover.
And then listening to that music, and one of those tracks. When you get to my age, you have to start doing things like, what music do you want played at your funeral?
Love it.
And one of those tracks is in there, which is "I Talk to the Wind." Just absolutely fabulous. The flute playing there is brilliant. I've picked I've picked tracks from my funeral that are as long as I can get.
What have you got then?
Because I want people to actually sit there and bloody listen to it. Not
I
give
agree.
it 2 seconds.
I agree. we've been to a few funerals. We've been to crems, and the crematoriums seem to be run on military lines. It's like one
Yes.
lot is going out, and you lot are going in, and there's a piece of music that might be played twice whilst you're coming in. Then it's a service. Then it's a piece of music that might be played twice while you're all going out, and that's it. Well, I'm with you on this. I mean, I have kind of said I'm gonna have to block book a church. I mean, because I'd like people to turn up about 90 minutes beforehand, to be honest with you, because I could put a whole set list together. But I talked about this with Chris Tanner on a chat we had last week, and he was going for Time by Pink Floyd. I'm just trying to think if he had anything else. What have you got on yours then? I got.
We're going to come in, which is a 4.5 minute. The Great Gig in the Sky,
which is all of the that's all of that, isn't it?
It's the woman who came in literally off the street. She was a singer and got paid 15 quid something for doing it.
She got about 15 million in the end, by the way. She did in the early 2000s. Effectively settle with the band. It did become a court case because it was deemed that her contribution was significant. But that's a lovely piece. You're coming into that, are we?
Well, because if you listen to the lyrics, and it's not lyrics, it's just people talking randomly. It says, "I knew I was dead" or something like that. Anyway, that was part of it. Then we'll have "I Talk to the Wind" by King Crimson, which is off the Court of the Crimson King, and then we'll have Lucky Man from the Emerson Lake and Palmer. Yeah.
Is that how you feel? Because Lucky Man is very. I am a lucky man. Isn't that what that is? Yeah. That's right. That's lovely. That's lovely.
So I've put in my wishes that the artwork must be put in the little thing that everyone takes home and never reads again. Which and why would you? All the artwork needs to be put in. Now, whether they can legally do that, who cares? I'll be dead. It's not my problem.
From those albums, I want the
album covers in the document.
That's a first.
There's going to be no hymns. There's going to be no religion. And that'll be it.
Well, I like what you're saying there, and you could. So, are you going burial or creme? By the way, can I ask? You've thought of the tracks, but you haven't thought that through.
No, we have good friends. In fact, the friend I'm referring to actually lives opposite Judy Zook, who I'm going to see later this year.
Oh, right. I've seen Judy Zook.
She's very good. So I will get to talk to her. So that'll be one I could answer next time we meet. How did I get into that? Also, Aileen and her ex-husband owned one of these burial sites that eventually will close, and it all gets closed over and just becomes trees. Yes. So that's where I'm going to. What they developed is an extremely good facility. There's all glass around it, which everyone goes into for the event. It's got one of the best sound systems going, apparently, because everybody wants to be able to play. And you're under no religious constraints or somebody trying to rush you through because the next lot are waiting behind, etc.
Yes.
You can book the whole afternoon and spend the entire day.
Oh, you might have to send me details on that. When I had Chris on a couple of weeks ago, he works at a recycling plant. He manages the recycling plant down in Swansea. He said they're telling him they're now going to be using kind of dry ice. They're going to be dry icing people. That's the next. So it's not burning them. Yeah, there's some kind of freezing that they're on about doing, and then kind of shattering you into a gazillion pieces.
No.
I don't know enough about it. I'm going. Can I give you my pieces? I'm going. I'm not sure about going in and coming out because I say, but all along the Watchtower with Jimi Hendrix. I mean, coming into that would be amazing, and going out as well would be incredible. Yeah. Okay. Who knows where the time goes? Fairport Convention, beautiful. But two Sandy Denny songs actually, and Meet on the Ledge. Meet on the Ledge I'd have on there as well. Yeah. I don't know. It said it's an odd one. The funeral, we went to a funeral last week, and there's one of our neighbours passed away, and it was actually Fleetwood Mac. I can't remember the name of the track, but it was one of them when they were at their kind of rumours kind of era. But it was a ballady type track. It was beautiful to play. Very, very moving service.
Yes.
And then, but the funeral that I went to a few months prior to that, as the, you know, he had the good, the bad, the ugly. You know, it was just like his humor. It's just, again, it's about the individual. And I do. I'm going to put a I'm going to put a playlist together on Spotify. It'll be Mark's funeral playlist.
Funeralists. Yeah.
Whether anybody plays or not, I don't know. But it's interesting that we've talked about it here. I talked about it last week with Chris as well. But it's I think it also says that for many of us, and also for I said the neighbour across the road here, because it came up in a eulogy. They said music very important to people. Him and his wife were big Eagles fans and Fleetwood Mac, and you know, middle of the road kind of stuff. You know, there's no Jean-Luc Ponty being played there, but still, music clearly very important to them, and as it is to me, as it is to you, and as it is to many, and that's why I think I do feel blessed. I feel like, again, go back to your Emerson, Lake and Palmer, a lucky man, in as much as. And I wonder as to whether we, or you in particular, maybe for each of us, we get the best years, because you got the Beatles in the early 1960s as well, fresh off the press. But right through that era, recorded music, live music, into the iTunes, and then into Spotify streaming. You've had whereas now we, as I said, we have effectively the entire music archive available.
There was something. Sorry to interrupt. There was something about that wait for an album to come out. So the Led Zeppelin 4 album, which was, you know, Stairway to Heaven, etc., which was the old chap with the sticks on his back. That was sort of introduced into the local music shop at the bottom end of Leamington Spa, and of course you had to wait for weeks for it to turn up. So that anticipation, and then going to buy it, and then, you know, getting on the bus and going home, and then playing it.
That's right. And reading and watching it, looking at it.
That's right. You would sit and look at it and read it. And there are times when I actually didn't put it on. It'd be another day before I put it on, because it's like, because once I've done it, I've done it.
Right,
blimey. The anticipation is gone.
Did you read Sounds or Melody Maker or New Musical Express? And what kind of impact those have gone? You see, I mean, again, as a young man, it was I was more Sounds than Melody Maker, but his Record Mirror as well, I might remember at one point. But they were, I mean, it were promotional marketing materials ultimately for the record companies. But that's where you got your news from. How else would you find out about musical differences? So and so's left such a band. This is the reason being given, or a new album's coming out. I don't know how we'd find out otherwise.
No. And yet it's interesting that you mentioned people leaving, etc. One of the things that always makes me quite sad in some respects is when they talk about I forget his name. This is an age thing. The guy who started Pink Floyd, Sid Barrett, who ended up going off the wall completely because of drugs and everything else, and becoming a recluse and overweight and lost his hair, and one of the reasons that, you know, Dark Side of the Hill was it Wish You Were Here. The whole track about him, effectively, because of what happened to him. I think, wow, you know, how much as that was the times. You know, you talk about everyone was popping everything and smoking dope, etc.
Yes.
And how many people, and would they have made old bones? Would we have been listening to Jimi Hendrix now in his dotage?
Well, he was one of those. I mean, a slight difference there, in as much as Hendrix, I think this whole 27. Have you ever? I only heard about it a few years ago. This 27 Club. There's a whole bunch of them. Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison. They pop their clogs at 27. I think Sid Barrett lasted into his 50s at least.
He did.
Maybe into his 60s, but was, as you said, was a burnout. The guy at the local wine merchant around here, he's from Cambridge. He used to see him regularly in a local pub. And also this guy goes right back to, he went to Hyde Park to see the Rolling Stones. Remember the Rolling Stones where they just after Brian Jones had died? Saw that in the day, and then he went from there, I believe he said, to the Albert Hall to watch the Who playing Tommy for the first time.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, goodness.
hard
Yeah.
hard to believe.
Yeah.
But I think with Sid Barrett, I saw a photograph of him online the other day. It was because he was again art school. There were lots of art school. You see, I mean, the Beatles. John Lennon was art school. I'm
Yeah.
not sure about Jimmy Page. There were whole bunches. David Bowie would have been art school.
Yeah.
Loads of these guys went through there. But if you saw Sid Barrett's art, I would have said he's pretty far gone already. It was kind of, it wasn't realistic. It was pretty crackpot kind of stuff. So he only needed. Didn't seem to take much to push him over the edge.
No.
I'm not that the early. I would go on. I am going to go and see the Nick Mason band because they play Echoes, and some of the stuff that I've seen of them live looks like a pretty good rendition of Pink Floyd in that era. But I'm not one for See Emily Play or Arnold Lane and stuff like that. It kind of doesn't do it for me at all.
No.
But I think I'm speaking on Friday. So I don't know if you listened to the last conversation was with Chris Tanner. Chris, I was in school with. He then put me, and I got Andrew Nutt on Friday. Andrew, he's now living in Perth. I mean, these guys, these were the Pink Floyd school obsessives. Do you know what I mean? Who would have, with headphones on, listening to Dark Side of the Moon. But there you are, 50 years later, listening to headphones on, listening to Dark Side of the Moon on a flight.
Wonderful. I mean,
it's hard to believe.
It's playing off of my phone, in my back pocket, and you think, wow, who'd have thought?
Correct.
Because like you, on my phone, on my computer, I've got. Well, we're going to forget Spotify, but I've still got stuff that I downloaded because I had the CDs at some point, and I've uploaded them onto iTunes. I've still got all those, and I said to my wife, we could play what's on my phone for something like 5 days.
Yes.
Non-stop.
Yes. Oh, I know. Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Do you still buy music now, though? Do you buy? There's no reason for you to buy. See, I'm still buying vinyl. Why? The stuff I got here, I didn't have. I didn't have Rugby Ditties before, so that's why I bought that now. But I didn't have the Tears for Fears album.
Tears for Fears is very good. Good album.
I got Steely Dan. I bought another version of Steely Dan Gaucho the other day because I've got that. I went with Andy Chudzik. We went to New York to see Steely Dan play Gaucho about 14 years ago. At the Beacon Theatre, but a new version of that. When I say a new version, so it's a 180-gram reissue, but remastered. I'm hoping it wasn't too expensive, so I'm hoping that will be a worthwhile listen. But listen, I went, I took the wife for lunch today. It was Valentine's Day.
Of course.
I'm assuming you took your wife for. Oh, didn't take her for lunch. I hope you got her a card.
I did get a card, and I'm doing dinner this evening, so it's
super. So we went for lunch today, but I said we went for lunch. I go for lunch, and we have some antipasti and some breads and whatever, and I spend like 60 quid, whatever, just for a quick lunch. But even these things, so I say that's £15.
Is it?
This is a bargain, I think. This is cheap, and when I look through this, I say £15 for pretzel logic.
Yeah.
So look, £60 for a lunch that's over and done with. You know what I mean? No. We won't remember unless I did anything particularly romantic over lunch. But I can't remember it. But it's kind of, if I ask her in 3 weeks' time, do you remember that lunch we went for? I'll be what? But the sheer, the artifact that is, I mean,
yes.
It's a.
I do miss that.
What can you get for £15 nowadays, Glenn? I mean, you're going to park. Okay, park in a supermarket for free, but parking in your town is going to cost you 4 or 5 quid for a couple of hours, and you can.
But didn't we all get excited when CDs came out? Because I remember my first CD was the Aha album.
Oh, right.
I'd got this brand new stacked deck, and it got the CD player, and of course you could whack it up, and you could still play it like an album because it would just change tracks one after the other. But you could skip and all that sort of stuff, and we let that happen really. And then the next iteration had to be sticking it in your phone or on an iPod as they became. And
Well, and the real worry now, of course, is that we've gone from, I don't know where my phone is. Yeah, my phone is here. Listen, it took us a long time to get to this, but if you walk around nowadays, you just see everybody is there. You go to a train station, the guy in the ticket booth, he's like this. Person taking the tickets, they're like this. On the plane. It's not far, all right, here's a prediction for you. It's not far to go from there to there, right? And Apple have just released whatever it is, a VR type headset. The guys look like complete lunatics walking around with these things there. But you would have also said that somebody would have been a complete lunatic. You wouldn't, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have seen this. You would have thought, this is crazy.
Do you do what I do? If someone's coming towards me doing that on a path, I don't move. I just keep going. See what happens.
No, I don't do what you do. Right. You.
Why am I supposed to get out of the way?
Well, there is, but of course, listen. I'm very conscientious on my road usage. Are you aware of my jive walking? I don't know if I need to bring this up again, but have you ever been? No, you don't know what I'm talking about, do you? No. My jive. I have. I don't know if you've ever met anybody before, but I've invented my own aerobic exercise, which works a treat for me.
Right.
Basically, I put playlists together on Spotify or on Tidal originally at 120 beats per minute. Yep. And then basically when you're doing, you might do your 10,000 steps. You probably do at some point. So you think, I'm going to go for a walk, and you measure whatever steps you take. I listen to music at 120 beats per minute. And you may not want it. Nobody else wants to do it, but it works for me. I have a bottle of water in each hand. I got dark sunglasses on the baseball hat, so I can't be recognized. But then saying that, 6'3" around here, there are not many of us. They probably know where I am. But I basically, I dance like Alan Partridge, as if he was going towards, if he was at a wedding reception, moving towards the dance floor, just as Earth, Wind and Fire have come onto the speakers. I do that. But I tell you what, it's my favorite form of exercise, because it's exercise, once again, with music. And here's a lyric then. Let's see if we got it. I already know the first couple. Music was my first love, and it'll be my last. But you know that then, don't you?
Yes. Oh, what's his name?
Well, the song is called Music.
Peter Frampton.
No, it's not Peter Frampton. It's not Peter Frampton. John Miles, if I remember correctly, isn't it? Yes, so there must be a connection. I don't know if it's the same era, but again, a classic one-hit wonder. But clearly to you, as it is to me, I find it odd because, again, we've got we met one another, not through bumping into each other at Snarky Puppy, but through work kind of contacts, working on a project together. But I find it interesting. I mentioned, we said Andy Chudzik, again, who's ex-Computer Center, who you know, Ed Kenny, who I don't know if you did know, Ed, whatever. The connection, but maintains us throughout all this time, even with yourself, is music. That is we've got the work element to it is maybe what brought us into contact with one another. But actually, we've found our musical, not differences in many respects. It's not necessarily. I mean, you and our tastes don't necessarily overlap a huge. Well, Beatles, yes, but some of the stuff you've talked about is like I'm a bit. Not so, but your appreciation of music, your love of music, and my love of music,
and I find my wife's not a great music lover. She does appreciate good music, and there's certain things she likes listening to. Spotify's been a great boon because you just put on some play whatever, and it plays it, and she thinks, oh, that's nice, and she'll appreciate it, but she wouldn't sit and go, I'm sticking my headphones on.
Right.
For 16 hours and listening to the entire Pink Floyd catalogue. She wouldn't do that. It doesn't float her boat. And
what about concerts? Do you go to concerts with her?
She came to see. Who did she come to see? Or her and I used to go and see Judy Zook. We saw her at least 4 times. We used to go and see Lindisfarne. We saw them loads of times. In the days of Alan Hull when he was around.
Right. I saw Richard Thompson last year. Richard Thompson was ex-Fairport. You probably like Richard Thompson from back. I never liked. I liked Fairport Convention, but never followed Richard Thompson. But Judy Zook I've seen a few times. Back in the I say 1980s.
Yes, likewise, and it was going back to our friend who we're going out to dinner with fairly soon. we were round at her house. She's sadly split up from her husband, and so she's looking for people to come round and spend time with, etc. And she said, "Oh, this girl lives opposite. She sings in a band." And yeah, what was her name? She said, "Oh, Judy." I said, "Zook." Yeah. Wow. Because Judith and I went, my wife's Judith. Wow, for goodness sake. She was. Aileen is Swedish.
Right.
Totally missed her by, basically. She's saying as us.
Yes.
Didn't hear of her over in Sweden, clearly. And now realises that she's what she is. And she released an album, if you get a chance to listen to it, last October. It's very good for someone of her age and what she's been through. She's just got over cancer and split up from her husband, who was the guitarist in their early days.
All right.
Clearly downsized. She's got back to her normal sort of size physically. She put on an awful lot of weight. Blah 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 blah. Her voice is still as good as it was back in the 80s.
I don't know if she was a songwriter. She was quite. Who's the lady from Fleetwood Mac? What's her name? She was.
Yes.
Stevie Nicks. She was quite. She looked. It may have worked for her, but she had that similar kind of gypsy, kind of alluring gypsy look about her. But she had a great set of teeth, if I remember rightly, and that's not a euphemism. It's not a euphemism. But she was very, and she had some wonderful, wonderful songs. "Stay With Me Till Dawn," if I remember, was perhaps was the biggest one. But I listened to Sports Car. I can't remember. There were a few albums that I heard a lot of at the time, and I saw her in. We never got many bands in Swansea back in the 80s, but I think they came on a couple of occasions, and I would have seen her. It was made apparent to me a few weeks ago by my daughter that I have very little female music. Again, it's the same for you though. If you go look at those lists that you gave from earlier on, I don't think I recall many.
Nope.
Female groups or female artists in there.
Yet, if we were to carry on, we could carry on for a lot longer, I'm sure. I go on to people like Gail Ann Dorsey. Ever heard of Gail Ann Dorsey?
Sorry, so you said Gail Ann there for a second. Gail and
Ann, A-double-N.
All right.
So Gail.
Yeah.
Space Ann, A-double-N. Dorsey, as in Jack Dorsey, Dorsey.
Yeah.
As an album called The Corporate World. She's a bass player.
Oh.
And an accomplished bass player. She was very good. I liked her a lot. Obviously, Judy Zook. Who else on the female side? Alison Moyet, I thought was very good. In her Yazoo stroke on her own.
Correct. Kate Bush. You'd have to give Kate Bush.
Yes. Classic. Absolute classic. Other bands. I'm just going through my list as we're talking. One of the best live bands, and supposedly gets lots of awards for live music, is a Dave Matthews Band.
I've never. You know what? I'm going to have to try it because I've heard of them, know they're big, but for some reason I go nah. But I've just gone into Fish, PHISH, and that is similar, I think, to Dave Matthews Band, a big American touring band.
Yes,
really well known, really well liked, but for some reason over in this country ignored. Just
saw them at the Albert Hall.
Who Dave Matthews?
I think this is Dave Matthews. I think they're all session musicians,
right.
So they're all very accomplished individuals. So not unlike Snarky Puppy in a sense. They've got a vocalist. Just I mean, pitch perfect, word perfect. Everything was just like you were listening to the CD. Now, not everyone likes that, because they want to hear it live and, as it were, vampy and sort of playing around the tune as opposed to exactly as it is. But I tend to prefer, I want to hear it played live by you to make sure that you actually hand play what you used to play on a piece of vinyl.
That's
my personal view.
So listen, let's start wrapping things up here. Have you got any other stuff any other final points, any stuff that you've written down that you thought through and you think we haven't covered that? I'd just like to get that out into the open.
Well, for me, my last list was obviously what started to appear in my world in the noughties. Ones of note would have been John Grant, interesting character. Interesting.
John Grant.
John Grant, yeah.
John Grant, Queen of Denmark. Is that the same John Grant? John Grant, Sigourney Weaver.
No, oh geez, what's his track?
I think it is.
John Grant, his famous one, which I picked up from somebody on Facebook who I used to work with.
Right.
For some reason, she was telling all her friends, "Oh, you need to listen to this."
Is he a gay man? A big gay man?
He's gay, and he's famous. The one I particularly liked was Pale Green Ghosts.
Right. I know who you're talking about. I don't know that track, but I reckon if you haven't heard the album that I've got of his, which has got a track on it called Sigourney Weaver, you'd never think that anyone is going to have that as a song track. But he is, he's a baritone. I think that's the other element to it. He's got a very
big lad.
Big voice, big man, big voice, and he does. I'll put it when I post this online. I'll put up some links below. Then perhaps to that. There's a John Grant, him performing. I can't remember. It's a beautiful ballad, stunningly beautiful ballad, very heartfelt. So yeah, he's good. I picked up on him as well, but only the one album. I think I might have bought a second album, but I never quite invested the same.
No, likewise. I've only stuck with the one album. Yeah, other names that came up. My wife and I spent a fortune to go and see Ed Sheeran at Wembley Stadium.
And
I mean, back to what we've talked about earlier, I have a real appreciation for anyone who can stand up there and play.
He can do the whole show. It's like Jasper Carrot, except it's just him and a guitar and a I don't know, some kind of echo pedal or whatever it is, and a light show. But he can do. I don't know if he has. Does he have a band for much of it, or does he have? It's just him, is it?
So I can send you photographs, but the stadium, he was in the middle of the stadium. We were, we were getting fed and watered and paid an absolute fortune, had little seats, etc. So we were a long way from it.
Yeah.
Huge big circular stand, completely excluded himself from the audience, and that rose up at some point, and he appeared, and everything was underneath. All the guys helping him were underneath and bringing up guitars, and it was an absolutely beautifully run system, because it's only him. Amazing. However, he played two tracks where a band came on, and they were in opposite corners of the circular stand, and they disappeared fairly quickly. And the rest of it was just him and a recorder, basically, and a keyboard. And even to this day, because his background is busking, and of course I'm thinking, listen, everyone knows what you do and why you do it, but he wants to tell everybody that what I do is I press this button.
Oh, does he? He demonstrates it.
And I'll play this. He goes, ding, 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 right, record that. And now I'm going to play this, ding, 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 ding. And he get a beat with his hand on the guitar. And he always plays his little sort of Spanishy style guitars. And before you know it, he's playing a tune to, what is it, 70,000 people.
70, 80,000. I think the other element that's surprising there is that if you think about the stadium bands that have existed, that have created stadium rock, that would have been like Bon Jovi, AC/DC, but you might put Muse into that category, and you put the Foo Fighters and people like that. Yeah. The fact that he's just like a one man. As I said, he's not a million miles off Jasper Carrot. It's one man standing up with an acoustic guitar, doing Funky Moped or whatever it is that Jasper Carrot would have done back then. But the fact that he can command, I mean, that's a skill. The fact that he can command the attention and the adoration of a stadium audience, which I would have. But then to do that, you've got to have this huge light show and all the other bits and pieces. I'm also quite, if you go back and you see Led Zeppelin playing Madison Square Gardens circa 1972, there's no big screens. There's a few red and yellow lights dotted about, and then the band performing. Yeah. And hopefully everybody kind of, rapt attention. Different strokes for different folks, I think. But
I agree.
I'm amazed, Ed Sheeran. Any others? What about the other modern ones then?
So I spent a lot of time in Canada because my dear friend sadly dropped dead, and we went to look after his, but we went to stay with his wife and daughter. They now live over here, blah, blah. At that time, London Grammar was quite popular.
I was hoping you were going to say Rush, but that would have been more 1970s, 1980s.
So London Grammar.
Move on.
Sorry. Another female band, Daughter, which is very good. Churches, Christine and the Queens. Listen to Christine and the Queens. The first time I saw her, she's French. I think she's gay, if that's something to do with it. She played on the talk show. What's his name? Norton. Graham Norton.
All right. Yeah.
He had her on doing her thing. I can't remember what the track's called. Tilted, as in tilted. It just because you don't see it coming. You're watching Graham Norton, whoever's got on as guest, and then comes a piece of music, and I was blown away by this girl. The way she danced, the content was sung in English and in French because she's French. Lovely rhythm to it. And
super.
For me, music is about being exposed to things like that you didn't see coming or didn't go looking for. That suddenly pop out and go, wow. That's really good. Love that. And I tuck it away and I've got it and I can always listen to it. It pops up on my repeat lists and that sort of thing. So other ones would be people like Niels Frahm and Alex French.
Yes, no, Niels Frahm is pseudo-classical, really, I think,
yes.
isn't it? Isn't he?
Yes.
So who's the other guy you mentioned?
Tracks.
Yeah, who's this other one?
Alex French.
Same type of thing?
Same sort of thing. Sorry, Alexis French, 2 F's in French. Very similar. He's done some music tracks for programs on the TV and stuff like that.
All right, brilliant.
Very listenable, very catchy sort of tunes. Very good.
Niels Frahm is, I think, actually, there's just been a Rick Beato. Do you watch Rick Beato podcasts at all? I said he's.
Yeah,
I mean, he does a fantastic job, I think, of
he does
explaining and exploring all sorts of things. I said it just seems to get better and better over time. But I think he's just done an interview with Niels Frahm. He's like electronic. Yeah, I think there's one literally in the last couple of weeks. So I think Niels Frahm is I wouldn't say is he like a Jean-Michel Jarre Tangerine Dream type of thing, but he does. I think he plays stuff, but he also does have a kind of music mixing element to it as well, which I kind of like that type of stuff. I listened to the other night here, again at significant volume, all the way up to 11. But I had a Hans Zimmer playlist on, which was purely theatrical soundtracks. But you can see why people use them, because the sound that it is a soundscape. It is it is as the screens used to be in a cinema. I can't remember, a widescreen, old kind of CinemaScope movie. Hans Zimmer's music seems to be as expansive. So
I agree. I think the other one would be Ludovici Einaudi.
Yes,
a bit samey towards the end as you start to listen to it.
A bit samey after track 2 and track 3, I think. But
seen him twice live. He's very good live. Very good.
And the other one I like is the guy who's done the Vivaldi, the Four Seasons. He's done some variations.
Not Nigel Kennedy.
No, not Nigel Kennedy. But again, a kind of modern interpretation on the Four Seasons. It's not a synthesized version, but just a slightly modern interpretation. I'll check it out. Glenn, I'm going to call it. I'm going to put one more then, and then I'm going to put a lid on our conversation. Because my wife has got a minestrone soup downstairs.
I've got to get the steaks on. We live local. Talking of Nigel Kennedy, where he learnt to play, which is literally about 20 minutes from where we live now. They have concerts. We went to a concert last year. It was the end of year leavers concert. It was for 2 hours, and you sat and listened to no older than 16 and a few 13-year-olds, because they would be moving school at 13 as opposed to 16, play piano, violin, cello. Just unbelievable. That talent at that age, it's just mind-blowing.
Well, you know why they were that good, don't you? It's to say this talent. I think talent is probably widespread everywhere. Go and look in a park maybe not the same anymore, but a park on a Sunday morning, watch young kids playing football and playing on it. You know what I mean? Talent is everywhere. I think the issue is practice. And whether
of course, it's the Yehudim menu in school, so that's all they do.
Is that what it is?
Yes. So that is that they go to play music and chuck in the odd A level or O level or whatever it has to be.
Yes.
In between all that. So you're right. They do that 7 days a week.
They are. And the name has come back to me, and I'll leave you with this one. So the Four Seasons, the version you want, is by Max Richter. Richter. Have you heard of him?
Right. I haven't. Oh, hang on. It's not the South African, is it? South African?
I have no idea his nationality. Max Richter, Richter.
Yeah.
And he will have done, as I said, he's done the Four Seasons. And I don't know whether, I don't think it's just adaptations or variations on traditional pieces. I think he does other stuff as well. But that is perhaps my favourite of what he's done. So, Glenn,
yes. Been a pleasure.
We've done a 1 hour and 50. This is a long form. Musical differences we've done here. My first long form, and I'm thrilled to have done it with you. And I appreciate the
likewise, loved it.
Curiosity, the interest, and the effort that's gone into it. I'm beginning to notice. I think I'm slurring slightly as we're getting to this stage. I have pretty much finished off the bottle of
good man.
Gone for the old Apothic Red here.
That's very good. Can't go wrong.
Well, it's a bargain at Costco, and so I've got a little bit left here, just about enough to get me through my dinner this evening. I've done my duty. I took my wife to said for a luncheon today for Valentine's. You're still ready. You're still ramped up and ready to do yours.
My wife's still at work, but she'll be home in about half an hour, so I've got half an hour to get myself sorted. So
get yourself sorted.
It's been great.
Super. Have you enjoyed?
It's been great.
We've had some fun. Give me a few days. We'll get it all edited down and I'll get it uploaded, and we'll do it again sometime in the not too distant future.
Love to do volume 2.
Brilliant.
Take care.
Cheers, buddy.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.